Jacob Nomafo. I'm the CEO of Lucid Meme and the co-founder with Jonah. A bit of a story before Jonah introduced himself about how we started, which we'll talk more about later. So I ran a campaign last summer. Very quickly realized the memes were flying off the shelves, completely blowing the other content out of the water, which obviously I like to see. And basically took that forward, solidified the idea into what that could look like for a meme marketing company. Obviously that not really being a thing before. Packed my bags in December, moved out to Barcelona to solidify the idea. And then in February/March, Jonah came on board, and we basically formulated what is Lucid Meme. Jonah?
Hey, so my name's Jonah Blackburn. I'm the COO and co-founder of Lucid Meme along with Jacob. And yeah, so I guess the progression of the story was, as Jacob said, he had this amazing data package and he realized there was this massive gap in the market that nobody was seeming to fill. And when he came to me with this data packet that showed just how highly converting and highly engaging this type of content was, as a marketer myself, having been in marketing for most of my career, in various events and various, different kind of industries, I'd never seen pieces of content perform like I'd seen this perform. So I immediately knew that I was on board. I immediately knew that that was, this was the area that we had to work on together, and it just made sense, really.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so that was lots of that kind of took place in March, April. And we had some fantastic news which kind of started in April, which again we'll talk more about. But it's been a whirlwind couple of months, and yeah, we're very excited to see where this company goes.
Brilliant answer, guys. I'm so excited to hear this news as well. For context and for people that might be joining in their grandma cardigans, what is a meme and why should marketers care about this method of communication?
I think maybe I'd like to start with this one, and then I'm sure Jacob's going to add some more on his end. But I mean, for me, a meme goes back to my childhood. It goes back to a time when you were scrolling on this new social media that is still having so many different trends and is still kind of evolving in such a rapid way. I think for me, it's going back to roots and saying this is where I first understood this resonates with me. This is the content that can be 10, 8 words long and will leave me in hysterics and will have this in my mind for days and days and days, talking to my friends about it. Because, I guess like going back, a meme is a picture with a section of comedic text. Okay. And when formed together, it merges an image and a text to create a contextual kind of understanding of a situation. It's cultural. It's, it's generational. I think, for each different, subset of society, they get something so different out of memes.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Yeah, I mean, yeah, in its kind of purest form, it's the text paired with a culturally relevant image. And it's the symbiosis of the two, which is where the magic happens. And as Jonah mentioned, these images are so deeply rooted in like our childhood, whether it's group chats with friends or everything. Like it's literally punctuated our growing up, and it's in the image mainly. I'd say is where that power is. It's how it draws upon those old memories and things you associate with it, and it's that is where the power is, and that's how that's what we capitalize on to to bring those feelings into future content for firms.
That's really interesting. So you're both mentioning kind of an emotional aspect to memes, which I think is something that I'd like to pick up on. So in the kind of real estate of social media, you're obviously taking up more room using an image. But would you say that this success that you've seen from these posts is actually tapping into kind of an emotional response from specific users?
For sure. So, I mean, I would say, a lot of our business is actually, a lot about the psychology of people. It's about, understanding why does this piece of content resonate with them? What about this content is standing out? Why is this content performing so much better than this other text or this other, just image? There has to be a reason, right? So when you look into it and you actually start to understand that when somebody reads something that actually resonates with them on a subconscious level, it doesn't matter whether they want to or not. They will have that stuck in their head. that will stay for the day, and they will be talking about it. It will be like a niggling in their brain, because you've seen something that's like, oh, I really agree with that on a fundamental level, which is what these memes are. It's invoking this fundamental emotion. And I guess, once you have that kind of initial feeling, there's no going back from it. So, that's why it makes it, in my opinion, that's why stuff gets so viral, because, it's building that kind of momentum, on each other of this kind of primal emotion.
Yeah, and like in the wider kind of arena of the internet at the minute, the currency is attention. It's been that way for a while, and it's very quickly continuing to skyrocket. And memory is ascribed by feeling. It's like the things we remember, the things we feel, whether it's a sad thing, a happy thing. Luckily, we're in the business of memes, so it's all happy, positive, smiley, obviously, as we all like it to be. So they're so effective because people feel something when they see them. They feel good, and they remember that. Whether that's from a company or a friend posting, whatever, they ascribe those positive feelings to the person posting. And that's extremely powerful. And it's all, as Jonah said, it all comes back to psychology. It's how humans work and think. But in this case, it's just bringing that kind of, way of thinking into social media, and really, putting people's feelings and emotions at the forefront, and then working backwards from there as to how you can get in front of them and make them feel the way you want them to feel.
And just building from that one more thing, actually, I think something that's very interesting to say is that, we are in a very niche bit of the marketing industry that is, as Jacob said, it promoted this happiness, that is the kind of prime of it. It's promoting a positive emotion. Whereas on social nowadays, I think there's too many people who are trying to get likes and follows by this controversial stuff that is actually pretty gray and pretty damaging. And, I think, there is way too many kind of agencies out there that don't really care what content they're putting out, just so long as it's engaging. We actually are doing something to brighten up people's day. It's something that, both of us love, and it means something to us. That is, as much about the business, you know, like as the product. It's about how it makes other people feel. Both me and Jacob are very happy-go-lucky guys. And we just want the world to be the same.
And to be honest, just to add to that quickly, that's kind of partly why we're sitting here today, is because we thought once we were solidifying Lucid Meme, it's a bit of a mad concept. It's quite hard to kind of explain to people that you want to make memes for a living.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of so outrageous that it makes sense. And we're just very lucky to be kind of our day to day, it's productive when we send memes to each other on WhatsApp now. So yeah, it just is how the world communicates. It's all positive, smiley, and we want to bring more of that to the world.
I love that. That's so interesting, guys. And I think that's your tagline right there. So outrageous, it makes sense.
I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
So Jonah, you mentioned memes kind of having roots in your childhood, and you both talk about growing up with them, what they mean specifically for different generations. And that takes us nicely to this next question. So different generations want different things. I think that's very clear in their behavior online. What does the social bubble look like for these different situations and these different generations online?
But I'd say nowadays, in one sense, there are lots of overlaps between these bubbles. Before, it was very segmented, where I don't know, my godmother would be in certain mothers groups on these places on Facebook, and I don't know, Mumsnet or whatever. Now it's a bit more, she's more likely to be in similar circles to where I am. She might be following the same big pages on social, whether it's someone like Channel 4. I saw they were posting memes the other day. So yeah, I'd say there's been a very clear shift from, segmented groups, definitely between young and old. And it's starting to merge a lot more. And I'd say that's just because, an overall kind of acceptance of this content, as opposed to it being just how us young people communicate or communicated. It's just seeping its way into the wider world of how we communicate, in the same way the internet's seeping into kind of every way of how we do everything. It kind of is the language of the internet. So naturally it's becoming the language of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with that. And I would also say that, as Jacob has said, it is really seeping its way through. And it's kind of, I would almost say there isn't really as much of a generational gap anymore in terms of social media. For example, companies like Ryanair, they have all different demographics following them. It's not just a Gen Z. It's not just, it is everyone. And everyone is finding it funny. My mother, my grandmother, they're still sending me memes, and this is quite a crazy concept for me. When as I was a kid, I was explaining to them what it was, right? And like, now, as it's evolved and as memes have grown and, it's really become a part of culture. Um, I think that way, way more people in these different generations are able to, kind of understand, because I think, the content is also being made in a more broader way. It's not targeting a youth message as much. It's targeting a message that us as humans have. And I think that also, goes into why it's so relatable, because this piece of content is triggering everyone. It's talking about a topic that is so on point and, is so relevant for everyone. It's not just you sitting there or you over there. It really is, a full, like, inclusive package.
That's really interesting, guys. Thank you for sharing a little bit more about that. And in applying this then in a work sense, talking to marketing teams around the world, what is your biggest advice to digital marketers to see results in the current marketplace?
Well, I would say that, I want to start with the big news that we're going to talk about today. And I think this is my single piece of advice, that is the kind of overarching one. So basically, we have just had investment from Gary Vaynerchuk. Is such a big name, Gary V in social media. He's like a social media god. And so, our whole message is now going to be, simply said, if it's good enough for him, it should be good enough for, it is that social validation, that I mean, we as humans need. Nobody wants to try something new. Everyone's so scared to be the first person to go to space. Like, everyone's, needs to get that validation. I think that now that it's not just clients that we can say we have and case studies we can produce, but it's actually a backing partner who has done it to a grand scale that lots of people would dream of, and has seen the idea, has validated it, said this works, I understand it. Our actual tagline is the proof is in the pudding. It's something that we believe wholeheartedly. It's something that is so a part of us. I don't just want to be telling you, I want to be showing you. I want to say to you, here is the results, and I can explain to you why they're like this. So yeah, I think that, it's about, understanding that people need, people need to be brave and people need to take steps. I think that's why these companies like Ryanair are doing so well, because these social media managers aren't scared. They aren't scared to do something a little outside the box. So I think, my advice to, try and convince your boss would be to just try and get him to see that the marketing space is changing. And if you're not keeping up, then you're left behind. That's kind of what I'd say.
100%. And I think that I mean, lots of this stuff, it comes back down to how people think. And it's a new thing, especially for these older decision makers. So you need to make it relevant to them and kind of present it in a way that makes sense to them. So bring it into their world. For example, so with the Gary Vaynerchuk pitch, we had to bring it into his world. He's obviously, a big opinion leader. So relative to most of the population, he understands what we're doing, obviously clearly now. But with the pitch, for example, instead of a normal pitch deck where we say, this is us, this is what we do, we made a meme on each page about Gary, and basically went through each slide and held a straight face as we watched his reaction of this meme we made about him. The point being is we made it relevant to him. We brought it into his world so he understands it. And for people looking to captivate their company's social teams to do the same, think about what resonates with your boss. What do they like? What TV show did they talk about the other day? Put a meme in front of them, see what their reaction's like, and then they understand the power of it. They feel the power of it, and then they can get an understanding of what that feels like for their clients. And the picture's much clearer to them as opposed to, let's post this funny image with 8 words on it.
That's really, really interesting. And I noticed as well, we're talking obviously about generations again, generations within the workplace, and how to kind of introduce something that maybe they didn't grow up with.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, in terms of process for a lot of larger corporations, there's reputation management to consider. They're risk adverse. They have many different demographics following them that they're perhaps worried about alienating. Do you have anything to say with regards to some of those concerns that may be?
100%. I would start by saying that, it doesn't have, we can talk about things and we can target key messaging off a very corporate message. Our whole skill set is we're able to merge a business message with this humor and still keep it professional. That's our whole hypothesis of what we're trying to do. We understand that firms can't, completely take the mick. There is a line of business standard, and that is for sure. But what we do so well is we walk that line up until its very last point. And in our experience and our opinions, those are the types of content that really pop. You shouldn't post something if you feel 100% safe about posting it, right? It's never going to do that well. That's the whole thing. Too many people as well try to make a version of a meme with a picture with 1,000,000 words, right? It's not about having more words. It's about less words conveying a stronger message. So yeah, I think that, yeah.
I'd say now, especially, people are really risk averse. Naturally, the times we're living,
Yeah.
people are getting a bit kind of holding on to their nest eggs or whatever the phrase is. I had a chat with an investment bank at the end of last year about memes and what they could potentially do with memes. And obviously, as Helen, you've alluded to, highly regulated industry, so many rules, so many people to get it approved, legal team, marketing team, whatever. I have two responses to that. The first one is, naturally, it's going to be heavily regulated. Obviously, it makes sense, but it also provides an opportunity for you to stand above the rest. It means that everyone else is being very vanilla and grey. So if you can work out the processes to be bold in your social content, as Jonah alluded to, it will, you'll really be able to stand, far away from the rest. A good example of that is Monzo. So that's my second point. Monzo, for example, they've done exactly that. Everyone talks about Monzo on social media. They're also, equally as highly regulated as Barclays, HSBC, Santander. But I'm not seeing them on social media. And the guy, one of the heads of social media, a guy called Richard Cook, you should check out his personal LinkedIn even. Ridiculously hilarious, witty person. And it's paying dividends for Monzo. I don't know about you, but I reckon 80% of my friends have a little orange card in their pocket.
100% agree with that.
Like, literally, like,
I just think, building on that as well, I think that, while all these CMOs are stuck in their ways and are being so risk averse, you can have a corporate strategy that is going to be really plain, really vanilla, will grow you a low yield, tiny little up and up and up, and we'll go up and down, up and down. But I personally don't believe that's the way to build a strategy. It's not the way the world has evolved to.
Also, you saying that's interesting. I just thought, like, the world's changed in that respect. Before, it was how uniform can you be? How can you, get this degree, which is really good and works, and then you can go into this job.
It's too homogenous.
It's like, this is the route, this is how you do it. And that's what it's been like in social for a while. You post 3 times a week, you do this, and you get that incremental growth. But now it's who's starting their own business, who's flying off to America to, freelance for 6 months or whatever, who's doing something different. And that's exactly what's happening in social. We're talking about Monzo, we're talking about Ryanair. We're not talking about HSBC or...
Well, I guess it's, it's more the companies that have, that have actually, been willing to take this risk almost. It's the companies that aren't scared to be above the rest. It's the companies that aren't scared to make their own path. And I don't believe companies should be, hiding behind their CMO's chair. I think they should be making these bold decisions, going into these board meetings saying, hey, we need to do something. Our growth is at 2%. It can be a lot higher. There hasn't been an agency doing this before us because no one understands this market. No one understands how to do it. There's individual people within these big corporations like Ryanair, like Monzo. There are skilled people that know how to do this, but it's still not an industry that kind of adds marketing we understand. And that's why we truly believe that we are a disruptor of the marketing industry. We're the first kind of marketing agency in the UK that does memes, that focuses on this. I don't even want to call it a niche because I truly don't believe it is a niche. It was a niche.
Yeah.
I don't think it is now. I think it's genuinely It is the way of communication. I mean, I genuinely have friends that I have never said a word to, and I only send memes and they send me memes back. And that's how we communicate.
That's really, really interesting. And just going further into what Lucid Meme kind of provide, the way that you guys work, what is the process then when you start working with one of your clients? Is it very, very different depending on the industry, depending on who they are, or do you follow some of the same kind of steps to actually get the stakeholder buy-in, the agility, the responsiveness that you need to then actually push through what
Well, I
is
mean,
kind of a newer marketing strategy?
I think it's super interesting because I think, because, as you said, it's such a new strategy, it's such a new set of processes that we've set up, for ourselves. I think, what's most important for us is first we understand the client. First, we have to understand what it is exactly you want. What are your KPIs? What does success look like to you? What kind of messaging do you want? Are your key demographics? You know, Timelines. We have to understand exactly the beast that we're dealing with before we have any sort of approach. And this is done by a series of about 10 to 15 questions that we've, proposed will give us a full picture of their current marketing state. And people can either choose to sign up for a bespoke project, which is where, you'll come to us with a certain need and we will say, okay, it's going to be X amount of memes and this will span, over a set period of time. And companies are allowed 2 of these bespoke projects because, we understand that, people want to try before they buy. Nobody wants to rush into get straight into bed with the company before they've tried it. And I get that. So, that's what these are the kind of there for. And then after you've had 2 of those, we have a retainer-based system where we have 3 different subscription models that will entail, different packages and different levels of service. And that is a month-on-month going basis. And that's kind of how our projects are working at the moment.
And diving into the detail of that process in regards to the creative, that's probably where most of the differences happen between the companies, obviously. Working out exactly who their audience are and what they do on social, what they do in life, and how that relates to the company, and then working backwards from there. We've had, in the past, we've spoken to clients and they said, we're a B2B business. We don't need to kind of get in front of people. And our response to that is companies are people. It's the people that are sitting at their computer, working for your company, and they're on LinkedIn. They'll see the post. It's all the same thing. So we just dive into what the people that we're trying to attract look like, and then really listen to the client into how that can build into either their wider marketing message or a specific standalone campaign. But we underpin everything with agility, as I'm sure we'll talk about. Social's so fast moving that we've got to be reactive with the way that we work. So that's something that we is baked into our process as well.
That's really interesting, guys. Thanks for sharing a little bit more. And I wonder, since, I'm sure that you can't name specific clients, but whether there's any pattern to sort of the challenges that you're experiencing as you start to work with different people. Is there anything that you've kind of learned as a takeaway thus far with the work that you're doing with Lucid Meme?
I mean, I guess for me, it's, understanding more at the beginning really allows you to build that strategy out. And I think, having that big picture view, as someone who comes from a company, who sees a company from very much, outside in, I think it's very, it can be tough sometimes when you're in these companies and you're looking, from the inside out. You don't really see the big picture. You just see this campaign, and you see the next campaign, but you don't see okay, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is the end goal, for the next 3 years, we want to do this. And I think, having that kind of in mind while this strategy is being built out, plus, as everything Jacob said, understanding who the client is to another level. You need to basically be the client. You need to get really inside the headspace of the client. I think, both of those merging, was something that we had to learn, and we had to, figure out how important it really was as we've gone on. And I think now it's something that we know, we would rather spend a lot of due diligence, really getting into terms, the nitty gritty, than trying to rush in and, try and just put together a strategy.
100%.
and that also lots of people aren't ready for it.
Yeah.
They just don't get it.
Yeah.
They weren't brought up. They didn't grow up with memes. They don't understand the
Not
cultural
involved.
significance. Yeah, they're not even seeing that many of them on their timeline yet for algorithmic reasons, whatever. But that's why we're so happy about Gary's investment, because it's a social proof that lots of people need to kind of
Push the button.
yeah, to get involved and to jump on the meme wave, which is very much here to stay and getting bigger and bigger by the day. So yeah, it's interesting. We found that, we need innovators. It's innovators that are receptive to what we're doing because it's an innovative way of marketing. But that, that shifts over time. So
But I mean, my real statement to anybody who's listening to this, who, has the question, oh, memes aren't helpful. What is a meme? Go and ask your kids is literally what I would say. Go and ask your kids. And I promise they will talk for about 6 hours about memes and why they're so important and why they love them so much and why they can remember the meme that 3 months ago they saw and found funny. It's like, I don't need to be, I've got too much data to prove it. And that's why we love this business. It's like, I can show you in real life. I can show you in data. There's millions of different ways I can show you the same thing. And it will come to the same conclusion that people love memes and that's not going anywhere.
I love that. I think that's so interesting as well. The recall, I think, is really interesting in such a crowded marketplace where I think you mentioned earlier, just how do you stand out when there is so much of the same and it's consistent? Like a big
Sure.
marketing strategy, I think social media marketing strategy is that consistency. It relates to brand. You want something that looks like you, speaks like you, and is on people's news feeds a lot for that incremental kind of success to build that relationship. So I think that's absolutely fascinating. In terms, and a massive congratulations about Gary, by the way. So
Thank you.
thanks.
what
Thank you.
are you guys thinking? What's next for Lucid Meme, and how can people listening kind of get involved should they want to, after hearing what I think is a fantastic pitch?
Thank you. So, I mean, what's next, honestly, is we're just going to carry on building, as we saw this vision in March, nothing's changed in terms of our head. We just now have the social proof that we can go to people and say, I guess we can kind of cure their reservations a lot easier.
Yeah.
I think, going to, to a pitch with that loaded rifle of, come on, guys, look at who's done it, and it's like people who are scared to bite the bullet just need that little nudge of like, it's okay, don't worry, I got you, and I think, that's really provided. But, I guess for us, it's just all about, growing our customer base and proving to everybody one by one that the proof really is in the pudding. I guess it's kind of a chicken and egg situation, as people want people to have, people want a client testimonials, but you can't get client testimonials until you have great, so I guess it's this whole, chicken and egg situation where people just need to bite the bullet and actually see what is going on. And I guess for me, that's what Gary does for us. It opens that door to be able to say, just push off a little bit, like it's fine, you'll be safe, and you'll do much better than you ever dreamt of.
100%. And that will be our kind of springboard, hopefully, towards our bigger goals. We've got big visions for where we want this company to go. And it's not just about the world of work. It's about, yeah, like generally like the way work works in, yeah, we only really know, obviously, we're mostly familiar with kind of UK work culture. We've obviously worked and lived abroad as well. We want people to feel happy on a Sunday evening about their Monday mornings. We want to change young people's approach to the workplace and the decision makers' approach to young people. And as a company, we want to really look after our employees as well. We have lived experience of, the ways that we can make our days better as young people in the working world. And that's something that we're going to bring to more people, and hopefully push out to the wider world and just make people feel happier, sitting at their desks.
It really is true, and I've always been a strong believer in this, is you never work a day in your life if you actually enjoy what you do. As someone who has found that out firsthand, where I work in a meme industry and I love memes more than anything, you really don't feel as though you're doing work. It's like you're doing things that you're just, like having fun and enjoying. So, to me, it's it really is about, it's about changing that culture and having someone want to come in and be excited. And, as Jacob says, not be dreading that Sunday night. Oh my God, I've got to go into work tomorrow, which I've experienced. I'm sure Jake's experienced a lot, and we want to just be different. We want to bring that positivity and enthusiasm back into the industry.
And the magical thing is that can all start with one laugh, one smile from one meme.
Very true.
I love that. I love that from both of you. And I have to say, Jacob, on your previous podcast with Sol, which was, I think, about a year ago, your number one top tip was ice cold showers.
Yeah.
So I feel like this might be a little bit easier for people to I never ended up doing it. I'm sorry,
That's
Jacob.
jokes.
I did it twice, and I was
Did you?
also out. Like, don't worry, you're not alone. It's very tough.
Do you still do it, Jacob?
Every day.
Every day? Oh my
I have
goodness.
to turn down the shower from freezing to the opposite way every single day.
Because every day you're like, today's the day. This is the day that I will do it. That I
But
will
honestly,
tell Jacob I did it.
But I truly will say that his mentality is such a unique mentality that it really drives you to, believe you can do things you never thought you could. The mentality of I can do it, and I don't care what anybody says or thinks. Like, I'm just going to do it for me. Like, I don't care. That mentality is an amazing mentality to have, and I truly believe it's a big driving factor of the business.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean,
It really came
everyone
through.
everyone should have a cold shower.
Everyone needs a cold shower. I honestly, your that did come across in our previous episode with you as well. I do recommend people listen to that because that's not on video. But there was some great takeaways, I think, as well about even then, how do you tap into a moment on social media? How do you move quickly? How do you move people? So I thought that was fantastic. To close off, I understand that, you might have some clients you want to plug here, but for people that are wanting to kind of see more memes on their newsfeed, see people that are doing this well. We've mentioned Ryanair, we've mentioned Monzo. Is there anyone else that listeners should sort of try and tap into, try and follow on their socials, wherever they might be, that you'd recommend?
Well, first and foremost, follow Lucid Meme on every single platform that you have. That's just the first thing I'll say. We actually will have announced some of this news as well. So, please go check out our socials. We're both completely contactable at any time, which is over email, which will either be at jonah@lucidmeme.co.uk or jacob@lucidmeme.co.uk. But for other pages to look out for, I don't think there's a set number, and that's what I think industry is so unique. There are still social media managers who are going into new positions who have this ability, right? And I think it's about saying, people, it's not just companies to look out for, it's people within, as Jacob said, it's about the people. And I think, it's no one company. It's, this can happen with anybody once you have the right approach. And I think it's just about, educating people about how to have that right approach.
100%. And there's companies, Ryanair, Monzo, people like not Pure Gym, Gymshark. They're all like the tip of the iceberg. And if I'm honest, as Jonah was speaking then, Helen, I started laughing because most of the memes aren't company pages.
Yeah.
The vast majority, they're like, super niche. So yeah, those are the ones that come to mind.
But then they explode, right?
They explode,
It's this page that wasn't created for that purpose, that because it's just so relatable and it's so organic, it goes insane.
So yeah, basically for companies that, don't post memes and probably also don't spend as much time on kind of in these worlds, it's thriving. It's blowing up at the minute. And as I say, these companies, just the tip of the iceberg, and the undercarriage of that is a whole world of meme content. So yeah, it's a wild world out there, and it's going to become more of our day to day.
It's a wild world. We're just living in it.
Yeah.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so, so much for your incredible answers, for giving us a little window into this fast developing. It's not a niche. It's not a trend. This fast, developing reality that can really further business aims that can really connect to people. And that I think, overall, what the underlying theme has been is makes people smile, makes people laugh. And I think that's just fantastic. What an incredible business aim to have and to share with people. Thank you.